So for our first double feature segment this month, I thought we'd go down a pretty crazy path, kind of motel and hotel themed path, where these are places you absolutely positively do not want to stay, that are run by very, very weird people. So let's start with Motel Hell. This was a movie that it actually took me forever to see. I had heard like rumblings about it, and but with its title, I'm pretty sure I had been confusing it with one or two movies for the longest time. So it was actually within the last few years I saw it for the first time. And what I just really love about it, just kind of in general, before we go into detail, is it's one of those movies where if you're just looking for something that is just absolutely insane, like, you hear, movies will come out or people will talk about stuff and they'll say, like, oh my god, this is so crazy, or well, this is so insane. It's like, oh, you have to see this to believe it. And you watch it and it's just kind of underwhelming. It's just like, well, yeah, we kind of seen that kind of thing before. Motel Hell is one of those movies that is absolutely fucking nuts, and I absolutely love it for that. This was one of those movies where when it first started, in like the first 5 or 10 minutes or so, I wasn't quite sure how I felt, but very quickly the weirdness set in, and it was kind of another one of those love at first sight movies for me. So to talk about it in detail, first of all the clues are right there in the opening song that's playing on the radio, where the lyrics are, you said you want to serve me, I think, and then it's, eating out my heart. Like, all the clues are there of what's going on here. There was kind of, I figured going in, once they started talking about meat, there was some sort of cannibalism vibe, because it did turn out that I knew nothing about this the first time I went into it. And now I've seen it several times, and just all the clues are there. But I didn't quite know to the extent we took this cannibalism angle. But the intrigue was always there, because it's a movie that for a long time, if you're going into it for the first time, you're probably just repeatedly asking what the hell is going on. But in this really fun way, because everything you're seeing is getting increasingly bizarre, and who these people are. Like, they're siblings, Vincent and Ida. For the longest time, I feel like I thought, even if they may have addressed it, I still remember thinking for the longest time that they were married. And so it's like this, it does seem like this brother-sister marriage of sorts, and this does seem like the type of place, and these do seem like the type of people where it's not impossible that's the case, I guess. So, going as far as this opening couple, where they crash after one of Vincent's traps, and the girl is saved, and the guy presumably dies, but we're in this weird place, and we're in her state of confusion, because everything happens so abruptly, where it's like, she wakes up, and he says, oh yeah, we buried him. It's like, that's just what you do here in town. You just bury them immediately. And there's just this really, her mind is just all over the place of trying to take everything in, and we as an audience are doing the same thing. But then eventually, it does not take her long to be brainwashed, essentially. And even though there are moments that come in, like when they're talking about eating dog, and that woman's dog in particular, you can see how it's like kind of a gut punch to her, but then the way they talk so casually, like, oh yeah, the dog is fine, it's just a little stringier than typical meat. Or there's, like, in the moment later when they're talking about, like, smoked tongues, and they're just doing it with such, there's such a, this is so common, like, this is just how they live. And so, you, as an audience member, like she does, also just kind of go with it. And the brainwashing starts to kind of make sense. And then we get into really horror territory when this inspector comes in. And I love this moment especially, where it's during the day, and he's just here for this inspection, and he's sitting here by himself while Vincent's off doing God knows what. And he's just sitting in, like, the silence of this place, but there's something looming, and this guy knows. He's one of those classic horror characters that knows a little too much and eventually pays for it. But then, after this, we do get the reveal of the garden and exactly what this movie's secret is. I feel like that's one of those where, if this movie came out today, it would be one of those ones where a lot of the marketing is, don't say anything, don't give anything away, or anything like that. And yeah, so when it's revealed what's going on in this garden that they have, where they're harvesting people and cutting out their vocal cords, and that haunting gargling noise that they make, and the way they're under the bags. And it's like the first time you see this, like just right away, there's so much more of the movie to go. Like this in any other movie would be the big reveal. It'd be like some big twist at the very end, and that would be what the movie is known for, but it's pretty upfront when we get to this. There's a little bit of build-up as we just kind of stay in the weirdness of the characters and have to decide, like, are these people good, or are they bad, are they friendly, or are they sinister? And then it's quickly answered when we see what's going on here. And the way they talk about it when they're driving out, and he's gotten the inspector at this point, and he says, like, I've got a surprise for you, and it's just this loving family thing that's going on, while this horrific shit's going on, and the way when he's driving there, and he's telling her, like, this is my chance to be creative when we do this, like, when I do the traps, this gets to be my creative thing, and it's like, you can see that it's something that really means something to him, to make the spectacle out of this that he does. And we get, and there's a recognizable face in here. One of the early victims in the band is John Ratzenberger, which is pretty funny given that his most famous role is probably, apart from Cheers, probably as a pig in Toy Story, which pigs are treated very similarly to what happens to him in here, was getting ready to happen to him here also. And what's interesting now is, now that we've established the horrific shit that's going on here, this movie starts to kind of have several genres in this. And this is a movie that could be so jumbled and messy and all over the place, but it just adds to its wonderful weirdness how it could be one movie at 1 minute, and then a completely different movie the next, and then a completely different movie after that. Because now we've set up the horror movie, then for a while it feels like this early 80s sex comedy, where we follow Bruce for a while, and him with this girl Terry that they've just taken in after putting her husband in the garden, and they're at the drive-in, and it's like this little bit, it's this kind of wholesome bit where he finds a way to go around the drive-in and still be able to see everything, and he's got the connections, he can get it on the radio and all that, and it's like this moment that's in some old romantic comedy, but then he gets, like, I guess what you would call 80s rapey, where they would just kind of do that, and it would be seen as, oh, that was just a little awkward faux pas, but it's okay. And then there's the moment when he calls out all the cars, and there's just gratuitous nudity, it fits the 80s sex comedy vibe. And there's the moment when he's looking at porn, and Wolfman Jack, who is the preacher, the TV preacher, comes up and says, like, oh, I need to dispose of this properly, and of course we know what that means. And the joke later, where Ida's at home looking at what I believe is the exact same magazine, and just these moments feel like we've gone in a completely different direction now, and then the swingers come into the mix, and the swingers feel like they're in a completely different movie. But like, normally it would be a criticism to say, oh, this feels like it's from a completely different movie. But this movie already has us going down a rabbit hole of insanity. Pretty much everything that happens that throws us off or throws us through a loop feels so welcome. Like, it just adds to the fun of the experience. So once we meet the swinger couple and we do that whole bit, then the horror movie kind of comes back a little bit. But then we go in another direction when there starts to be what appears to be a connection between Terry and Vincent, kind of out of nowhere, where she gets very seductive towards him, but she's also kind of got the thing going on with Bruce, and then this makes Ida, the sister, jealous. So it kind of turns into this, what seems like a love triangle kind of thing. Of course, on Vincent's side, it's mostly a ruse, we eventually learn, but there's a while here where it feels like it's turning into a love triangle movie, or even, I guess you could say, a love square if you bring in Ida's jealousy, despite the fact that she's a sister. And it feels like a Woody Allen movie is starting to brew here, right in the middle of this insane horror movie. And that's, in the disorienting nature of that, feels like the dizzying nature of that feels like it's right in line with everything else, because we're just kind of struggling to keep up with what's going to be around the next corner. And that's actually a great feeling to have during a weird horror movie. Even if it's not horror scenes that are getting us there, our mind is set for, I don't even know what's going to happen now. And then that's when we get to see what happens after they've harvested enough, where see this hypnosis they put them in with the colors and the lights right before they kill them. They set them up like they're on a space mission, and the ropes around their necks are their belts, and they hang them and kill them and drag them out, and we get to see the whole process of what goes on here with the bodies. And it just feels like we're right, like we talked about going down that rabbit hole of weirdness. This is like, we're getting to the bottom of it, kind of, but there's still things around the corner after we've seen this. And it's like, I think it's also something that's appealing about this moment, and as far in as we are, is that it's something that we figured out a long time ago, that they are the meat that's being eaten. Like, we figured that out quite early, but still seeing it play out and have everything we thought confirmed is still just as creepy, even though it's something we figured out a long time ago. And I think that's just really impressive to be able to do that. And then we get to this big climax when the bodies that are left are able to dig themselves out, but still have their vocal cords cut out, and they're making the gargling noises, and they're walking oddly because they've been buried up to their neck for quite some time now, and it essentially turns into what looks like a vengeful zombie movie almost. And then just when you think that's the peak insanity, then we get what is our final climax, where Vincent appears, this famous image of him with a pig head on and a chainsaw, and he and Bruce duel to the death in the slaughterhouse that they've made. And it's there's like I said, a lot of people try to reach that moment of just the peak insanity, but the build up on top of what we're looking at, it's one of those things where these images that you're seeing could only be in one movie. There's only one possible context that this could have, and honestly, at the end of the day, it feels kind of brilliant that we were able to go through all of this, and the insanity and the craziness never stops and never runs out of gas. It just keeps one-upping itself, and that, I just really appreciate that. And you know a movie is crazy when a character like Bruce is the hero of it at the end of the day. And just the great punchline to end on, the preservatives line, is perfection and was just perfectly built up to. I really love this movie, and even though, like I said, I had heard rumblings about it and knew its title for a long time, I still feel like it completely snuck up on me. And there's a reason I've watched it several times since, especially during this season. It's really fun to come back to. So I really love this, and I had to invest in this Steelbook Blu-ray as well, which I was very happy to find. So going on to Eaten Alive. Eaten Alive is a different experience, but also feels like we're going down a similar rabbit hole of insanity. But this one, I feel like, is much more immediate. It first of all, it does start immediately with this famous moment where we open, and the very opening shot is Robert Englund's belt buckle as he's undoing it, and as he's trying to coerce a prostitute into doing something she doesn't want to do. Interesting way to start a movie about a killer crocodile, and yeah, he has that famous line that his name is Buck and he's ready to fuck. If you've read Tarantino's book Cinema Speculation, he has a great little write up on Eaten Alive itself in his chapter about the Funhouse, another Tobe Hooper movie, and he has a whole section devoted to just this Robert Englund moment, and it's great. And Robert, this was a really early Robert Englund role, and he's like charisma personified in this, and he's barely in it, and he ends up like stealing the movie, but in between that, after we get this scene, we see an unrecognizable Carolyn Jones, who I always love so much. We talked about her a few years ago in House of Wax, and she's just like this beautiful, beautiful woman, and to see her play this part, so unrecognizable as the woman that runs this brothel, and that, like, already we're setting up vibes there where something feels off, and a lot of it's in the casting, which is great. But then, as we follow this woman from here, this encounter, to the hotel, where she's escaping one hell and going into a significantly worse one, and that's where we meet Judd, who is Neville Brand, who is incredible in this, and incredibly creepy. What's great about this is, when she first gets there, he is a character that is so insane, and so diabolical, but when he starts off, when they first meet and he comes out, he's more like gently weird, like he's soft spoken, and he comes out and says what, like he's forgotten that he runs a hotel for a second, and then when she's signing in the book and he like physically moves her hand gently to sign in the right place. It's like, there's just little things that are off about him, but we know something is. We just don't know yet to the extent of how insane and crazy this person is. But it switches so fast. Like, as soon as he learns that she's from the brothel, he goes from 0 to 100 just like that. And once he switches from 0 to 100 in this moment, he never really comes down from 100 for the rest of the movie, which is amazing. And he attacks her, and they both end up going down the stairs, and there's a moment where he's like briefly unconscious, and it's like we're watching the beginning of a climax to another movie. And eventually this gets to us getting what feels like intentionally a Psycho moment, where this is a girl we followed from this moment here into this moment, like she might be a main protagonist, and then she is viciously killed with a pitchfork and thrown to the crocodile. And that sets up where we are and where the rest of the setting of this movie is going to be, pretty much. And what's great about this is now you've set up that this is our insane killer, this is our insane scenario, this is our decrepit location. So what typically happens here is that regular people will come through and fall victim to him. Well, this is where the movie has other ideas. Because the couple with the child that comes through, you would think would be a normal family being thrown into an insane situation. But instead, we've got William Finley and Marilyn Burns, both of who we'll actually talk about later this month, and their child, who is Kyle Richards, 2 years before Halloween. And they have a dog, and they just look like, at first, this all-American normal family. However, first of all, the dog gets eaten, like, right away, and secondly, once we're in the room with them, we realize that these people are sweaty and dirty and unhinged and mentally unstable and taking pills, and this girl, it's actually hard to watch how much of a hell this little girl is living in with these people. And Finley especially is just so incredibly off the rails, and it's like the way he almost attacks her dramatically, and the way she's crying about the dog that's just died, and his response is to start barking, and then he goes outside with intentions of avenging the dog, I guess. And it's so... We were talking about how disorienting things are in Motel Hell. This feels like... Motel Hell feels like heaven at this point. Once you're in this just grimy place with these grimy people, and there is the great moment when he goes out to kill the crocodile, and there's a double kill here where Judd appears, and now he's got a scythe, this giant scythe that is a terrifying weapon. You'll see it on the cover here, and that's his weapon of choice for the remainder of the movie. And while he's killing William Finley, and we think that's where the scene's going to go, and it's like, oh, he's going to feed him to the crocodile, and that's going to be the thing. No, the crocodile decides to not wait and bursts through the banister of the porch and takes him. And it's like, this is when it's like, okay, basically everything about this movie is going to be unpredictable. And you just have to be ready for anything. And I will say, this is a very unpleasant movie. Like, extremely grimy, extremely unpleasant. And the thing about it is, I remember seeing it younger and really enjoying it. So, and that stayed in my head. And then, like, a few years down the line, I went to show this to people. And, like, around the time we're, like, really meeting the parents, which is quite early, I remember thinking, like, God, this is a lot rougher than I remembered. And it's... however, despite that, normally when I would say unpleasant, it would be a criticism, and it's something that I don't like. However, this was Tobe Hooper's follow-up to Texas Chainsaw, which is one of my favorite movies of all time in general. But Hooper, in this particular era especially, had a very specific hold on unpleasant and grimy and disgusting and hopeless. And there's just something really specific he had that still ends up making the movie work regardless. And the use of the location also, it's such a minimal location, but it's so effective. The fog feels like it's permanent. There's, in the William Finley death scene, there's like this inexplicable red that's taking up the whole screen. There's the moment where they're under the porch, Kyle Richards is hiding under the porch and he's going after her, and there's like a whole cobweb-covered maze going on down here. This very chilling moment where he's trying to, like, lure her out, and when you're a child, when you see Judd trying to lure you somewhere, you are not gonna go that direction. Just the vibe of him is just so off and chilling, even when you're not completely aware of what's going on. And so, or you haven't even seen the gigantic scythe yet. But, yeah, and the way he's so... I say he goes from 0 to 100 and stays at 100, but still, he can go back to being calm while he's still at 100. Case in point, when Marilyn Burns is getting into the bath, and he just strolls in to attack her. Like, she thinks he's just wandered into the room when he's come in to attack her and beat her and wrap her in the shower curtain and take her hostage and tie her to the bed. And it's set up in such this casual way, like you can tell he's been doing this for a very long time, and he's very comfortable with his methods that seem reckless and probably still are, but it's something that's probably been going on at this hotel for a very, very long time. That crocodile's probably very, very well fed at this point. And just knowing that without seeing anything that came before this is something that looms over the whole movie in this really creepy way. Creepy, but also very effective. And of course, Marilyn Burns' scream, as we know from a couple of years prior, is iconic. So we get a lot of that also. And then just throwing in more Buck scenes, where it's, like I said, not only is this like peak Robert Englund, but also there's another layer of depravity added when we start making it like a sleazy sex movie with a lot of gratuitous nudity and stuff like that. Who ends up being one of our final girls at the end, like right before the climax. just kind of strips for no reason. And there's just something about that grimy 70s exploitation vibe where everything feels inappropriate and appropriate at the same time, given the context of everything else. And of course we get this wild climax where at this point anybody can die and anything can happen. And it's actually, the movie's been so unpleasant and just killing anybody and everybody at this point, and so giving us almost nobody to care about in any particular way except Kyle Richards, that it's actually a relief when, like, normally you'd be like if a killer wins at the end, it'd be like, oh, whoa, that's an interesting way to go. And usually there is some sort of cliffhanger that suggests evil wins in a lot of horror movies. But here, when Judd is killed and eaten by the crocodile, there is a relief, because with all the hell she's been through also, it would not have been surprising at all if this movie just ended with Kyle Richards being eaten and Judd continues on. So it's like, and that ending could have been appreciated in its own way, given the rest of the movie. But I feel like an actual relief that this is one where evil does not seem to win. But then again, I don't think we want to know where the Kyle Richards character would end up after having this night happen in her childhood. So maybe she'll be another Judd at some point, who's to say. But this is our double feature, I think. So I'm much more inclined to rewatch Motel Hell. Eaten Alive is not a movie I come back to often, because it can be quite rough, but that's also, I appreciate it. Like Texas Chainsaw is a movie I can go back to over and over and over again. It's interesting to me that Eaten Alive doesn't feel the same way, but I don't know if it's the involvement of like a very small child or what, and a dog being eaten, but yeah, it's still, Motel Hell has this really fun quality to it that definitely is something that's much easier to come back to. There's a certain kind of fun quality to Eaten Alive, but it is like in that exploitation vibe where you have to be in a really specific mood to really get into it, and you might want to rewatch it before you show it to people. Usually I rewatch stuff before I do that, but when I did that this one time with Eaten Alive, I hadn't, and I probably would have made a different choice if I had watched it more recently, when I decided, oh, I should show this to people because it rocks. But yeah, so that's how I feel about these. So this, I think, we're about to wrap up our first week of October, so we still got plenty of things going on. More continuation of everything you've seen up to this point, and some more stuff coming up. We're going to talk about a franchise that might be related to something we've talked about in this video, and a nice big video with all of us on Halloween, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So until the next thing, I think that's it.